into the latest edition of ESPN FC Live. Manchester City are champions for a fourth consecutive time. It was the 10th time the title race went down to the final day in the Premier League. Maybe didn't offer the excitement we might have hoped in the end, but the big talk is Manchester City are champions. If you're wondering why Janusz Mihajlik is looking across the screen, he's watching the celebrations at Liverpool, Jurgen Klopp, on his final game there. We've got LME as well and Gab Marcotti too. So I'll start with you, Luis Miguel. Give us your reaction to Manchester City this season, sealing the title.
Well, I mean, in many ways, it was everything that we expected. Obviously, I think when you face somebody like Manchester City, regardless of how good you're doing, and let's not take anything away from what Arsenal has done this season. It was a really great season under Mikel Arteta. The project continues underway, but you have to be perfect if you want to beat the almost omnipotent Manchester City. And that's exactly what didn't happen for any opponent to face Pep Guardiola's side. And, here's the thing. It's not like we haven't seen this before, but at the same time, I think Man City were also in many ways lucky in terms of momentum. The Club World Cup final in December, December when they had that real tricky unjoyous moment when they weren't getting any wins at all and they were looking not great in the table. They went away and they kind of regrouped, and that was their opportunity to really come back together. Kevin De Bruyne coming back from injury, Erling Haaland looking at his best when he came back from injury himself. And I think that those were the moments when Liverpool and Arsenal really should have been, we need to keep going. We cannot afford to do anything. And that didn't happen. And you can't do that when you face Manchester City. And yes, we can talk a lot about what other teams didn't do. But in the end, today, I think, like the game against West Ham and Arsenal's game against Everton was in many ways a microcosm of who Manchester City are. They need to just get the job done no matter what. And that's exactly what they did. And regardless of what we want to talk about moving forward, in the history of English football, never has a team won 4 domestic league titles consecutively. And they've done that. So well done to Pep Guardiola and Manchester City.
What your thoughts, Gab, on what we've seen from Manchester City today all season and this 4th consecutive title for them?
I mean, I think LME nailed it, right? It's 134 years they've been playing top flight football in this country. And nobody's ever won 4 in a row. It's obviously 6 and 7, which I think is another stellar achievement. Let me get up ahead of this because I know that there's going to be people out there, the haters are going to point out, yeah, but what about the 115 charges? And we won't know about that because of the process and the way they've decided to do it and the way the lawyers have kind of forced us to do it. But I will say this, I mean, even if City are guilty of all the charges, and they may or may not be, if you simply look at the spending that City have done, if you look at the wage bill that City have had, and you compare it to the top sides in Europe, it's not significantly bigger. In fact, in some cases, it's lower than the very, very top sides. We have a very lopsided, very unequal football league, not just in England, but around Europe. And within that, City are among the biggest spenders, among the wealthiest clubs. They're right up there. But it's not it's not like they're orders of magnitude ahead of Manchester United or indeed Liverpool or indeed Arsenal. I mean, if you look over the last 10 years, or Real Madrid or Barcelona or Paris Saint-Germain or Bayern. So this is really incredible what we're seeing. Sometimes more than one thing can be true. And the way I think that the club has been run has been pretty close to perfect over the last 6 or 7 years.
So what hope can any other team have, Janusz, when you get to the final day of the season, you're Arsenal, you barely step a foot wrong all season, and you're still 2 points behind the mighty Man City?
Well, I mean, other than being perfect, and I look back at some of the seasons, sometimes that's not enough, right? Liverpool was nearly, I mean, they've lost 1 game. Okay, fair play, they've drawn 7, but I mean, you have to have 9, around 100 points to get through them. But what you need to have is obviously something that Jurgen Klopp showed, something that Arteta continues to show, But the key here is, because next season is going to be no different. I'm waiting to see. Maybe I missed it. Gab will probably tell me. I thought it was significant. And once again, Pep Guardiola came ahead of the game saying, "I'm not going anywhere. I will be here." They're just as hungry every year. I've talked about on Friday. We were all here just about. We've talked about how relentless they are, regardless they're winning 3-4, 5-0. I've watched that again. I watched these little details because I think everything else is obvious to just about everyone. So I look for that little edge, and it's incredible what these players do, game in and game out. And Gab is quite right. It's irresponsible to even mention the fact of 115 when it comes to the players and the managers. Players, by the way, we know last. Nobody's going to share that information. Even if they did, they wouldn't know, or I wouldn't know how to look at it. Again, Gab is probably the only one that can actually coherently say something about this. What does that mean? To players, they need to play. They need to be challenged. So, sorry I went in a roundabout way, but in order to challenge that, I hope that Mikel Arteta doesn't just add to the squad, because you need to challenge your best players. That's the difference between Manchester City and the rest. Liverpool are actually the closest to it. They were contenders this season. I think, barring some injuries and maybe the announcement from Klopp, they sort of have that culture where almost no one, with the exception of maybe one or two players, is sure of being in the starting 11. You don't have that at Arsenal. So that's the next step. If they keep the hunger, they're hungry, right? Now you have to say, okay, Saka, you better play. I mean, he's playing good football, but that doesn't exist at Arsenal. And that, to me, is always the difference. Because look at Manchester City. Take away maybe 2 or 3 players. Nobody is sure of their place in the starting 11.
Can you anticipate more of the same next season from both of these two sides then, LME?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say something about Arsenal quickly, just defensively, because they are ahead of schedule. We have to remember that. Mikel Arteta's project is fantastic. And you have to be just exactly what Gab and Janusz were talking about. You have to be perfect, if not hope for less perfection from Manchester City in order to beat them. And I think Mikel Arteta and Arsenal fans, definitely Arsenal fans, should feel very proud of what they have done. And obviously the season wasn't lost today. It was lost, in other matches. It was lost in other moments as well during that campaign. And as I was saying, Manchester City, who went through that rot at the end of last year, began 2024 with all guns blazing, and you just knew they were not going to lose a single game in the league. And so that is a wake-up call for everybody. So I think, to answer your question, I expect the same from Manchester City. I expect them to strengthen once again. Gab said it. I agree. This is a squad that's if not the best organized squad in Europe, it's definitely one of the. It's definitely well arranged. The reason why Pep Guardiola wants to stay is because he's happy where he's at. But Arsenal's and Mikel Arteta's Gunners are going the right way. But I agree with Janusz. Now they really have to keep pushing and challenging themselves. They have to really become a stronger, strengthened squad. Last season, they were the youngest squad in the Premier League. So it takes time for them to understand this. Remember, Mikel Arteta joined Arsenal in January of 2020. So, it wasn't too long ago where he only had his first full season. And now for the second consecutive time, they've ended second. That is commendable. In the era of Manchester City's dominance, winning the Premier League is not necessarily the exact prerequisite to demand how good your season has or has not been done. If you want to beat Manchester City, you have to be perfect. You just have to be. But right on course for Arsenal and Man City. Liverpool, I'm a little bit worried about them. Not worried, that's the wrong word. But I'm intrigued to see what happens under Arne Slot. Obviously, he's a great manager, but I'm intrigued to see what happens when you're trying to shake off the identity of a legendary manager that was Jurgen Klopp and bringing Arne Slot and his ideas. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
What does your gut tell you on that next year then, Gab? Do we look at a 2-horse race here, or do we see the likes of Liverpool challenging?
Yeah, I'm going to take a slightly contrarian view here, so this may surprise you. I don't think City were that good this year relative to last year. If you go through it, if you look at the individual, some of the individual player performances, obviously Foden, big strides forward. I think this year, more than other seasons that I can remember, I think injuries really hit the league hard, with the bigger clubs. And I really hope that whoever's in charge of the medical staff at City and at Arsenal, who, among the big clubs were the two who stayed the most injury-free, I hope they get their medals too, because I think it worked out very well for both of these clubs. You look at the points total. You look at maybe some of the questions going forward. I don't think Pep is gonna want to sit on this on his hands this summer, because when he looks back, and I take on board everything you guys said about the run in 2024 and all the victories and whatever, but I don't think this is where he necessarily wants to be. He doesn't want it to be this close, where a team like Arsenal can push him all the way. So I'll be fascinated to see what happens. I mean, funnily enough, and not to be conspiratorial, but Pep's contract is set to expire in 2025, but it's kind of a meaningless contract because, if he decides to leave, he's going to leave. And if he decides to stay, he's going to stay. He has that much. He's earned the political and sporting capital there. Arteta's contract also expires in 2025. I would expect some sort of announcement very, very soon. And if I'm Arteta, I would also probably want to carve out some guarantees about the investment that, is going to be made in this Arsenal team going forward, because, we can all point to areas where they can strengthen. And if I'm Arteta, I say, hey, we got really fortunate with injuries this year. We can't count on that every season.
Okay, I want to go deeper onto some of the players right now when it comes to Manchester City and the seasons that they've had. Janusz, please find something nice to say about Erling Haaland. I know you didn't score today, but he ended the season as the Premier League top scorer. That's 27 goals, and he's the first player to retain the Golden Boot since Mo Salah did it in the 18 and 19 finishing seasons.
Again, missed a couple today.
I thought you might have to mention that first.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm gonna stay in my lane again because I'm his hater, I suppose. I appreciate what he does. I just don't appreciate people telling me that he's this incredible player, because that he is, and he's just a great striker. He does that. Has done it at Dortmund's doing it here. He'll probably end up at, I don't know, Real Madrid and Barcelona, and surrounded by those players, given his characteristics. I think he's going to continue to score goals. But I mean, is he going to be the first name that comes to my mind? If I'm still around 20 years from now, probably not. But congratulations, scored. As Gab was saying, this was, and that's why I'd worry about if I were Arsenal, Liverpool, because this wasn't the best season for Manchester City. This wasn't the best, or at least the sort of season that Erling Haaland had last year. And yet City still won it. So if he goes back to scoring, 35 goals, 40 in the Premier League, forget about it. So I don't want to be a hater about him, but I will continue to talk about.
You're hating. You're hating. Just own the hate. Own the hate.
I will just continue to keep it on the level, right? Because I mean, it was a very, very good season. But look at Cole Palmer comes in and cold. Not that far away from him. A young kid that's not even a striker, really.
Janusz, 4 players in Europe have scored 20 or more goals in the last 3 seasons, league goals, right? Their names are Harry Kane, pretty good, right?
Yeah. I'll take him over Haaland.
Erling Haaland, Kylian Mbappe.
I'll take him over Haaland.
Lautaro Martinez. And
I may take him over him as well.
You take Lautaro over Haaland, okay.
Oh, close.
The 5th one, because La Liga is not over yet, it could be Robert Lewandowski, and I know you're going to take him over Haaland.
Well, I mean, granted, Haaland's so young, but he was there fighting, Lewandowski for a number of years. Came close a couple of times, but I knew you guys were going to go there, and I just end up looking bad on this one. But I'm not going away from it. I think he's a great goal scorer. That's about it.
Oh my goodness. We just heard LME. Don't hate, appreciate. Just on Phil Foden, Gab, voted best player in the Premier League this season, and we saw today, once again, for good reason.
Yeah, no question. Look, I'm not going to say Foden was the player of the year at Manchester City, because I will give that award to Rodri every single year in perpetuity. But I think what we saw was really special, and I think it foreshadows what I think is inevitable. And we saw it today with him lining up in the middle. He is the heir apparent to that sort of attacking central midfield role. Going forward, what are the club's plans? Is it going to be, him and Alvarez? Obviously, De Bruyne has got a year left on his contract and is older. Bernardo Silva is only 30. He's got 2 years left. There's always a question of, is he going to stay? Is he going to move on? Is he going to want a different experience? That's always a big question mark. But I think, that middle of the park behind the striker, that's Foden's position now. I think it has to be. And I think it's been, I think what's made it kind of special and different with Foden is we've heard about this guy since he was 16 years old. And City have had so many young players come through their academy, and then for one reason or another, Pep's not sure about them in the first team. And so, they might hang out for a year or two at 18, 19, 20, and then they go off somewhere else and, become Taylor Harwood Bellis or whatever. But Foden stuck around, and he really did his apprenticeship, and he really didn't play that much between the ages of 18 and 21 or whatever. We saw glimpses. But now he's really coming into his own, and I'm really excited to see what he can do.
LME, did you drop out because you just couldn't deal with the hate for Haaland from Janis?
My Wi-Fi server is Norwegian, so it came out, and I'm back.
And don't tell me you're going to pick Foden too as the best player.
No, I made my Premier League end of season awards, and Phil Foden, everything that Gab said, I agree, and there's a few reasons why I love everything about him. Part of it is Kevin De Bruyne's absence, by the way. Pep Guardiola saw an opportunity to put him there. But my player of the season is actually Rodri, because I believe that I think
his son.
Sorry?
Janish's son.
That's his son. There you go. See, that's why me and Janis connect on Rodri. But one of the reasons why I have him there, and I'm not going to bore you with stats or anything like that, because it's not really about that. To me, I think that Manchester City, obviously the Goliath that they are, they can find ways to win without Erling Haaland. And they can find ways to win without even Phil Foden. I don't think you can say the same thing when Rodri's not there. I think that Rodri is so vital to everything that what Manchester City want to do under Pep Guardiola, that it's specifically this season. I mean, the 3 losses in the league, right, were due to not all the major factors, but were without Rodri. That's how important he is. And it's kind of the same thing, when Vicente Del Bosque said of Sergio Busquets, if you watch the game, you don't see Sergio Busquets, but if you see Sergio Busquets, you see the game. It's the same thing with Rodri. To me, he is that important, and it's one of the main reasons, and it's a bit of an underscored, underrepresented hero. But take nothing away from Phil Foden. He's like a Brazilian in the 70s, disguised as an Englishman. He's just an unbelievable player. And the things that he has done this season are remarkable. And I agree with Gab. I can't wait to see what else he continues to do. In fact, I'm kind of, in a way, angry that he has to be led by Gareth Southgate in England's Euros, because he deserves so much better than that. But I'll talk about that another time. I just think that Rodri, to me, was the player of the season.
And
let me. First of all, that's Villa legend Gareth Southgate to you. So
first of all, he used to be, okay?
And won Borazoni Cup as captain.
True.
It's funny, the Rodri Busquets parallel. I mean, I'm not a Busquets guy. And to me, there's an obvious difference between him and Rodri.
No, there definitely is. Yeah.
Rodri scores really, really important goals, too. We saw him do it again. At 2-1, we were heading towards squeaky bum time, potentially. I mean, let's not forget, at 2-1, one more goal, one more screw up, whatever else, they equalize, Arsenal win the title, right? And who is it who puts it at 3-1? It's Rodri. Who is it who does it in Istanbul? It's Rodri. That's not even his job.
Right.
And he does it when others aren't doing it. So for me, max respect to Rodri.
Yeah. Janis gets the final say on his son.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm always going last. So there's, you've said, chapeau bas, as they said. But listen, it's important because even on a team like Manchester City, you feel the absence and his aura. It's not his skills. It's not that others can't do the job. I think it's almost as if that team is built like that. Remember when Fernandinho was there? I'm not trying to say that Fernandinho was as good, but he was pretty good, right? Because you have that spine with the way that, you're committing so much forward in terms of players and so much risk that you take. If there's two-way player, and Busquets was wonderful in his own way. And I didn't think, to be quite honest, that anybody was going to impress me as much as Busquets did over the years. And for me, he has passed Busquets at this stage.
Okay, Yanis, you go first next because we know you've been keeping an eye on
Yeah, I was
Jurgen Klopp's
trying.
farewell. Talk to us.
Well, no, I really haven't seen what's happening. Not that much is happening right now. So look,
You
I
don't
mean,
need to see what's happening to talk about Jurgen Klopp and the legacy he's left at Liverpool.
special, we've talked about it in the past on Friday even. And, I was thinking because everybody keeps coming back at me, with other managers, even, the love that Jurgen Klopp gets from Anfield and from the supporters is nowhere near what Sir Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger did when they left. And they've accomplished as much and more, right? And I get that, but I think in terms of culture, in terms of community, in terms of what he's built so quickly, I've said it and I'll say it again. It's the fans will tell you everything, and what's happening right now. How many managers? I thought about it today. When you start being a manager, you probably hope that something like this will happen to you at one stage in your life, right? And that's all you have to say. I just look at the fans. At no stage in his career, he was in danger of losing his job at an institution that is Liverpool, one of the biggest and greatest clubs in the world.
What do you think's next for him, Gab, once he does have this break?
I take it at kind of face value what he said. There's more to life than work. I thought he was very open about it. He talked about his gas tank. I talked about running on empty. This is not, I don't know that this is a necessarily sabbatical. I don't know that he knows. If he wants to go back and spend time with family and just watch football and enjoy football from the sideline, I got no problem with it whatsoever. Right now, that's the way he's heading. I think he's gonna sit it out. He's gonna focus on his health, both physical and mental, and then he's gonna say, all right, do I have what it takes to come back? And if I do come back, what kind of a project do I want? Do I want to rebuild a big team? Do I want to go back to Mainz? What do I want now? What do I want to define my life? Does he necessarily come back in football as a coach? I don't know. I mean, to me, it's pretty much a blank slate. I don't believe he's thought about it one bit about, how am I going to get back in now? No, I think I just take him at face value, and I assume he's being completely honest, and good for him.
Gab, I think you're right. I don't know if there's a place and there's time to come even close to what he's had here. And I know there's a difference in age, but if you look at Sir Alex Ferguson, if you look at Wenger, it's almost you leave in a project that's impossible to match with everything that and he's much smarter, much more experienced right now. And there's probably some ideas that he has. Maybe if I had to do it all over again, I would change this and that. It could have even made it better. But I just think that in terms of club football, if I had to bet small amount of money, and especially that I don't bet, I'd say that this is the end for him in terms of club football. Maybe national team, but I don't know if he's I think he's an everyday guy, so that's possible. But club football, I think this is it for him, if I had to guess.
So that's Jurgen Klopp's future. What of Liverpool, though? We've touched on it a little bit earlier in the show, LME. The fact that Arne Slot's coming in, what are the expectations for him and this Liverpool side next season?
Well, as a Peruvian, I follow any Peruvian that plays in Europe, and there aren't that many, right? So one of them is Marcos Lopez, who plays for Feyenoord, and so I follow Feyenoord quite a little bit. And Arne Slot is a tremendous detail-oriented man manager with a lot of good ideas, who's versatile, who likes to play this sort of 4-2-3-1, but he can be very, diversified in his thinking, all that good stuff, right? But it's going to be, and has a connection with the fan base. That to me is one of the biggest things, because now he's entering Liverpool. And Janusz said it perfectly. And Gab talked about Jurgen Klopp's humanity and the way that he really doesn't, he just wants a break, and he needs to really just refocus on his life. And I completely agree. But the key thing, one of the main things that Jurgen Klopp is saying goodbye to, is that strong bridge, that strong connection between him and Liverpool as a community, not just as a football club. So I think that Arne Slot is going to enter this and truly understand that and respect that, because that will be the most important part of what he wants to do. From a footballing perspective, a business side, and what Liverpool want to do in order to once again look to really try and win the Premier League title and compete with the likes of Manchester City and Arsenal, there are many things that need to happen, right? James Ollie said it a few days ago here on this show, and I agree. I'm intrigued to see what Fenway Sports Group is going to do in terms of Mohamed Salah and his final year of his contract. He's not getting any younger. I'm not saying he's going anywhere, but what is the future hold, especially now that a new manager comes in. So little tiny things within the squad. I'm intrigued to see how they're going to work out within Arne Slot's system, Arne Slot's idea, somebody that's entering the Premier League for the very first time. That's why I said I wasn't worried, but I'm intrigued because there are many things that Slot's going to have to balance. One of them is the key bond and the relationship between him and Liverpool fans, which is going to take time. And then the other side is, kind of formulate and mold the squad that he wants in order to be successful. So it's going to be one of the most important, if not the most important preseason summer for Liverpool Football Club in the last, since Jurgen Klopp arrived, I think.
Do you want a quick say on that, Janusz, before we move on?
No, the one difference is, aside from, a new manager is that assuming the squad stays the same and it gets strengthened, right? It's totally different than when Sir Alex Ferguson was leaving and Arsene Wenger. The cycle was over. I don't think it is over. And by the way, you can improve these players. And there's everything looks great and lovey-dovey, but there's always one or two or three or four players that kind of looking for fresh start, maybe thinking that they get a chance, right? I'm not just thinking about the likes of, Gakpo or Gravenberch, with the Dutch manager coming in, but maybe even Darwin Núñez if he stays, or Luis Diaz or Mo Salah. I think if you look at some of the younger players, you look at Harvey Elliott, who's coming into his own. You look at Diogo Jota, who obviously, when he's healthy, makes a difference immediately, even when he's out. So when I look at this team, obviously they need strengthening. All teams do, but I think it's a different proposition. I'll go as far as now, because everybody's going to forget this before the season starts. I'll go as far as Liverpool once again challenging for the title next season.
All right, I want to talk about Chelsea with you, Gab. As it stands, they've earned Europa Conference League football for next season, but if City win the FA Cup, they'll get Europa League football. Are they on the up?
I mean, assuming not everybody's injured next year, when people talk about Pochettino, I've been disappointed, but if I had to give him a letter grade, I always say I would give him an incomplete because I can't judge him when he's had so many injuries this year. They spent so much money on a lot of kids. I think they're going to have financial fair play or profit and sustainability rules issues, which means, I think he's likely to have to work with the players he has. I think he's got some really, really talented player. And I think there's a lot of questions to be answered. But I think if you're Chelsea, you look at where you ended up this season and you say, all right, everybody's fit next year. I need Champions League football. And I think that has to kind of be the baseline, as well as obviously developing the players that you have. I think it's they've gotten this experiment where they basically, vacuumed up so many of the top prospects in Europe without necessarily paying attention to how much they cost. Some of them have developed. Some of them, Romeo Lavia, look at the amount of money they spent on him and the minutes he's played. So many of these guys, they just couldn't get on the pitch. So I think there's some big decisions ahead, and I think they really need to step it up next year. But for this year, I got to give Pochettino a pass for the way things are now.
What is the assessment, LME, of Manchester United, worst ever Premier League finish in 8th?
Well, for what they wanted to do, it's an F. I mean, they wanted European football, no? They at the very least they wanted Europa. That they didn't get that. Obviously, well, fair to say, as you mentioned, if they win the FA Cup, then things will change there. But let me just begin by saying that this is not fully Erik ten Hag's fault. I'm not blaming everything on him. Of course, he's the head coach and the manager, and there is some blame on him, specifically I think in the way that sometimes he blindly defends his team for things that are blatantly not happening on the pitch, and he just says them. It's a bit weird.
But if you analyze, you will see we are the most entertaining team in the Premier League.
Exactly. He does it a lot. It's very weird. It's like watching Black Mirror or something. Like you're seeing something that's not happening, and then you're listening to him talk about a game, and it's like, are we seeing the same thing, Eric? Because that's not what. And I get what he's doing, but he takes it to a level where it's just like, you're just seriously, you're like George Costanza-ing yourself out of this. It's ridiculous. So I give Manchester United an F. Part of it is Erik ten Hag, but the other part is I think a lot of the things that happened in the summer were the people that came in. Haaland is a very talented player, but is he what he wanted for that amount of price of money? Like, how many goals did he score? 8 in the league? Like, that's not what you needed, right? Granted, a lot of injuries, specifically Licha Martinez. Yes, he's not, necessarily the most consistent, but he was offering a lot. Erik ten Hag made 14 center-back pairing changes in the season. That, to me, speaks of vulnerability, of a team that really is just vulnerable, right? So there's a lot of issues at United, and I know that Sir Jim Ratcliffe keeps going on about, like, I want steadiness, I want balance, I want consistency, I want professionalism, I want Manchester United to be back to where they are. Well, you got to show it, because the same things that Gab was talking about Chelsea, I double it this preseason. Manchester United really need to get together and figure out who they want to be. And there's a lot of spaces where they need to figure out who to replace, what to do. And if Erik ten Hag is the man next season, then I think he also has to look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do to be better? So this season, I give him an F. There is opportunity. There is chance to do things this summer to fix it, but a lot needs to be done.
Sorry,
Is he the man next season? Yes.
Did you mention him there?
Mm.
We in the media, because we're generally superficial, like, we treat it as if it's Jim Ratcliffe's club. It's not. He owns a minority. He's in charge of the football side. To operate in football, you need money, right? And who's in charge of the money side?
So we're back to the Glazers. Yeah.
They haven't gone away. And so when he gives it the big one, the Wembley of the North, rebuild Old Trafford, do all this, I kind of feel like, dude, you're a billionaire, right? We keep getting told all this thing, like you're worth 20 billion or whatever. Either you buy the whole club from the Glazers, and at the right price, they would have sold it to you. Or otherwise, don't pretend like you have all this autonomy and that the buck stops with you, because the reality, everything he's going to do that actually costs money, he's going to have to run past Joel and Avi Glazer. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, because the problem is that's exactly what he's doing right now. He's literally being that man that wants to say, "This, I'm in charge of the football operation. This is what I'm doing." I'm with you 100%. The buck stop with the Glazers, but if you are Sir Jim Ratcliffe and you're the one saying, "Football operations, this is what I'm doing. This is what needs to happen," then something needs to happen. Some more synchronicity needs to happen, because right now it isn't. That's really the ultimate point here. So when you look at United, a lot needs to be done.
Yeah, and you know what? Something about Ten Hag is forget about what's happening. Well, because we have to, for me to make that point. Forget about what's happening with Manchester United outside of the club. How good Ten Hag is in his X's and O's. We've talked a lot about culture, haven't we? And I just wonder if there's a culture there where everybody, I'm talking about players, trust him. And that's a worry for me, because if you look at Wenger, if you look at Sir Alex Ferguson, he was tough. It doesn't mean that you have to be, Jurgen Klopp and give everybody hugs. LME, I worry about Unai Emery, right? Even though he said that he doesn't want to be friends with players. I just wonder if you lose 4, 5, or 6 in a row, which can happen to them, how that's going to go, because he is demanding, right? So I look at all these personalities, and I think in order to have staying power, to build something big, players have to trust you at all times. And I worry about Ten Hag with that, because this team lost some games and showed traits that are unbelievable for any club, never mind for Manchester United. We've seen how many games they've lost when they were leading. It was absolutely incredible. There's a certain level you can't go below, even if you have injuries, which, by the way, as Gab was saying, Manchester United had maybe as many or more than anybody else, just about. I get that. But there's a certain level you can't go behind it. And I worry about that. It doesn't matter who they get, but I don't know if I trust Ten Hag to be the sort of a manager that when things are, tough, everybody rallies around him. And I think it's just like, when you go to war, right? You have to trust your general. And I worry about that. Not X's and O's.
Speaking of managers, Gab, where's Roberto De Zerbi going to land?
Good question. He's certainly out there. I don't think he did his reputation too many favors. And I go back to, when he talked in March about like the project and needs to sit down with the club and everything and talk about the future. Talk about misreading the situation. Because I wanted to shake him. I want to say, dude, everybody loves you. You play phenomenal football. You're doing great. You've had this incredible amount of injuries, and Brighton for the first time having to compete in Europe and so on. And so in the end, you're taking hits in the league when, I think if everybody had stayed fit, I think Brighton would have probably finished top 6. In fact, without question, if everybody had stayed fit. Instead, they just lost a zillion games in a row at the end of the season. He took this attitude. He channeled his inner Antonio Conte. You can't do that with Brighton. You can't do that with Tony Bloom. And I think people look at this and say, all right, so if I get the Zerbi, what am I going to get? Am I going to get somebody who's going to maybe rock the boat a little bit? And why were Brighton so terrible late in the season? For me, he's still a phenomenal coach. I'd love to see him at the right club. I mean, we showed what he did last season. I think he's going to bide his time. I think he's going to apply for jobs. But I think some of what's come out of his camp, and again, to some degree, I'd put it on his agent and the people who look after him. I don't think it's necessarily going to help him. Weirdly, I think if he had left, say last summer, or if he'd left in December, I think he would be right up there in line for some of the top jobs that are open, like the Bayern job that, of course, he was linked to at some point, along with everybody else. Now, I'm not so sure. I think it could take a while.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Well,
where he goes next?
Just as a circus, I'd love him to go to United. I think it'd be incredible. Just as a neutral cinema goer, eating my popcorn and just watching what would happen. Because, and I'll tell you something, Janusz was talking about culture, and I totally agree. I mean, I would love to see the Serbian coming into Manchester United and see, right, this needs fixing. I need this. You can stop that right now. You, Harry, come here. I need to talk. I would love to see that. I just want to see it. I want to see the chaos. I just want to see that. But I think that Gab is correct, though. Last summer, the options would have been plentiful. This summer, I think he's going to be a little bit more methodic about where he wants to go. Maybe even back to his native Italy. I'm not sure. I just think that this time around it'll be a little bit different. But make no mistake about it, Roberto De Zerbi in the Premier League has been wonderful. So I hope he gets another good job that suits him once again.
Yeah, Gab is right. The visual were not right, but I get him. I understand him. He's hit the ceiling. I mean, where are you going to go with Brighton? Even when everybody's healthy right now, I promise you, with all the healthy players right now, this league is what it is. Brighton aren't going to go anywhere. He knows that he's accomplished everything there is to be. And there's actually quite a few options this year in Europe, right? So it's a short thing. The trajectory that he's taken is pretty decent, and he's just taking his chances. So, and by the way, Gab, I think, there are some promises made in terms of before the season, what sort of players that he wanted and what Brighton were able to do for him. So I don't know if the visuals, though, I agree with you, aren't great, but I probably would have done the same thing.
Kay, have you noticed how Janusz is always like, Gab, you're right, Gab, but never to me. You never did it.
Well, no, because right.
Rodri.
If we just
I'll give you Rodri. You gave me Rodri.
If we just sit here and agree on everything, I had to agree with it because I was surprised by it the way it came out.
I'm just joking with you.
This is a manager that won what 7 games in the last 30 Premier League games. I think you can look at De Zerbi and say, wait a second. I mean, he hasn't done all that great in the Premier League in the last 30 games, and he hasn't. This is not just end of the season.
Brighton has gone through some major key injuries as well. It's been tough.
And under Potter they weren't all that bad either, right? So it's not like the Zerbi comes in and all of a sudden we hear about Brighton for the first time.
All right, I guess that Roberto and Erling are not on Janish's Christmas card list this year. Anyway, guys, we'll be back to do this all over again during the Euros, live reaction to the games, maybe even some live watch-alongs as well. So be sure to check out everything that's going on here on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being with us all season and for being with us today. See you next time.